Hello student, welcome to another season of Knowledge Quest. The subject is biology and I'm your teacher Lydia Asiago. Today we want to learn about classification 1, our topic for today. So we are learning about biology and we are saying today we want to learn more about classification 1. So we want to learn about classification 1. Now, when we talk about classification 1, it means that there is another classification that we are going to learn, probably in Form 3 work. So when we talk about classification, there are terms that I want us to define before we move on with the lesson. So I want us to define some terms, definition of terms that we are going to use. So there are terms that I want you to know as we discuss on classification. Classification, first we are going to define the term classification. We will define the term classification. We are going to define the term taxa. We are going to define the term taxon. We'll also define the term taxonomy. Okay, taxonomy. And finally, we are going to define the term taxonomist. Okay, these are some of the terms that we are going to use as we discuss into today's lesson. Now, when we talk about classification, what comes in our mind when we talk about the term classification? Classification means you are putting living organisms into groups. Classification means placing living organisms into groups based on their structures. Putting living organisms into groups based on their structures. So in this case, the key term is that we have a group of organisms. So we are grouping. So in that case, we talk about grouping. We are doing grouping, placing living organisms into groups. So there is the concept of grouping, living organisms into groups, and then we are using their structures. Okay? So when we talk about grouping living organisms into, we are placing living organisms into groups. And then what are we using to put these organisms into groups? We are using their structures. Now you realize that there are organisms that have similar structures. We have those that have different structures. So those organisms that have similar structures, what do? We put them into a group. And those that have different structures, we separate them. Then when we talk about classification, we classify all living organisms, both plants and animals. Now, when we talk about a taxa, now those groups into which we put organisms, of course we have said based on their structures, based on their similarities in structure, those groups we call them taxon. So when we talk about taxon, this is just a singular word. Taxa, this is plural. Okay? So those groups, we refer to them as taxa. Taxa means many. Taxon means singular. So it is good we differentiate the two terms. Now, when we talk about taxonomy refers to the science of classification. The science of classification, we refer to it as taxonomy. So this is the science of classification. Okay? So that science of classification is what we refer to as taxonomy. Now, when we talk about taxonomists, that scientist, the scientist who does the taxonomy is the person we refer to him as the taxonomist. Remember, we say that when we study biology, it is one of the career subjects. And in biology, we have so many branches of biology, one of it being taxonomy. So those people who study about taxonomy, those who specialize in the science of classification, we refer to them as taxonomists. Now, for today, we want to discuss on classification in plants. Today, I want us to discuss on classification in plants. So we want to measure on classification in plants. Okay? Now, when we talk about classification in plants, for us to discuss about plants, for us to classify plants into groups, into taxa, remember I said there are terms that I'll be using throughout the lesson. We talked about taxonomy, taxa, taxonomist. So those terms you should be aware and know how to use them. Now we are talking about classification of plants. How do we classify plants? How do we classify plants? Now the first thing we ask ourselves, plants, what are the parts of the plants? So if we have plants, what are the parts of a plant? Basically, when we talk about a plant consists of the stem, a plant consists of the roots, okay? A plant consists of the leaves. Is that true? Yes. Any other part of a plant? So you want to look at the structure of a plant. A plant can consist of flowers. So a plant has a stem, a plant has a root, a plant has a leaf, and a plant has what? Has flowers. Of course, we have plants that do not bear flowers, but generally these are some of the parts of a plant that we do what? We are able to see in a plant. Now, when we talk about classification, what do we use? What do we use to put organisms into groups? What do we use to put organisms into taxon? Because we said taxon is a group of organisms that have similar characteristics. Now, when we talk about classification of plants, I believe, as you can check on my table, I have a lot of flowers, I have a lot of leaves, I have a lot of plants that have stem, others they have flowers. So we are going to discuss more about plants. Now, basically we are saying that for you to classify plants, first we have to understand the structure of a plant. And we've said a plant consists of the stem, a plant consists of the leaves, a plant consists of the flowers, and even the roots. So before we do classification, we must be very keen and understand that for you to classify organisms, remember we said we use their structures, their similarities in structures. That means that these structures, these similarities, we should be able to observe them. So for that reason, we say for you to classify plants, then we use observable features. We work on observable features. Okay, student, I've said that for you to classify plants, we must work on observable features. We use observable features. Now, which are these features that are observable, that we can see, and we put the plants, different plants, into similar groups? For example, now, if you talk about observable features, what are these observable features we can see? Number one, we can see the stems. Plants have stems. Plants have different stems. Plants have roots. They have different roots. Plants, they have leaves. If you check on the leaves of plants, they look totally different. There are those that are similar, there are those that are different. When you talk about flowers, we can see different plants having different flowers with different colors and etc. So in this case, I want us to discuss each of the observable features that we use to put plants into groups. And I will start with the stems. Okay? So we are looking at the stems. So number one, we are going to look at the stems. Now, if you look at the stem, if you look at different plants and their stems, what are we able to observe? For example, I have a plant here. And this plant, of course, my student, I hope you know the parts of the plant. For example, this part of the plant, this is a leaf. We say this is a leaf. Now, we've said that a plant consists of more than one part. So we have the leaves. An example, this is a leaf. This is another leaf. Okay? These are what? These are leaves. So my students, I believe you can see that this is a leaf. If I pick another plant, I can also be able to identify a leaf. So this is a leaf. This is a leaf. Okay? This is a leaf. All these are what? These are leaves. So that is one part of the plant. We also have another part of the plant we call a stem. A stem. So at this point here, this is the stem. Okay? Can we see the stem? Yes, this part is the stem. So for the case of this plant here, I will say this part of the plant is the stem. This is the stem. Okay? So are you able to identify the stem? Yes. Okay, we have the stem. We have the leaves. And then we have plants that have flowers. We have plants that have flowers. For example, can you see this plant? Yes. This plant, are you able to see the plant? Yes. Okay, this part we call, this is the stem. This is the stem. These are the leaf. This is a leaf, so we have several leaves. Okay, then if you go up, you can see the what? The flowers. So this part of the plant is what we refer to it as what? The flower. So basically we are saying that a plant, we can talk of a plant structure and we can see the plant, the body of a plant is differentiated into different organs, For example, I think I've not shown you the roots. For those students who don't know what are the roots, for example, this is a plant, okay? And we can see these are the what? These are the roots. We say these are the roots. Different plants have different types of roots. We are going to see that, okay? This one is also a root. This is a plant. So basically we are saying for a plant, we can be able to see at least 4 parts, 4 organs, where we have the roots, we have the stem, we have the leaves, and we said we have the flowers, okay? Now, I want us now to be very keen to identify the differences between these structures. Remember we said for us to put these plants into groups, we use their similarities in their structures. So you look at the structure of a plant, look at the similarities between those plants. If they are similar, we put them together and we say that is a group, that is a taxon. If they have different features, we put them separate. So I've said we want to start with the stem. Now, which are these observable features that we can note in a stem? Now, plants can be put into different groups based on the type of the stem. So for the stem, we can talk about the type of stem. Okay? What do I mean by the type of stem? Now, if you are very keen, if you look at this part of the plant, and you look at this part of the plant, there is a difference in their stem. there is a difference in their stem. Number one, if I'm able to press on this stem, if I'm able to press, okay, I'm trying to press this part of the stem. This stem looks soft. This stem feels, okay? Maybe you may not be able to feel what I'm feeling, but what I'm saying, go and try to get a part of this plant. Can you see the shape and the color of this plant? And try to press on the stem. We say the stem is succulent. We say the stem is succulent. So in that case, types of stem, we have those that are what? Succulent. Okay? Succulent stems, these are stems that are filled with water. Their tissues are filled with water. So if you can see, okay, you see what I've done? I was trying to press on the stem. And you see the stem is becoming somehow weak. So we have plants whose stems are succulent. Succulent means the tissues in the plants, they are filled with a lot of water. I think you learned that when we talk about the cells becoming turgid. Parenchyma cells, most of these plants, they are made up of parenchyma cells, which are filled with water, and they make the cells become turgid. That's why you can see the stems are turgid, and in that way they provide support. Now, I want you to check on this other stem. Okay, look at this other stem. This one, I try to press on this stem, okay? If I press on this stem is very hard. It is very hard. I may not even be able to press inside because the stem is very hard. So we say we can have a stem that is what? Hard. So if I was to put plants into groups, and basically I'm looking at their stems, I can have plants whose stems are what? They are hard. Okay? The stem is hard. Or at times you can talk about woody stems. Okay? Talk about woody stems. So here we have succulent stems, and then we have woody stems. They are very hard. Most of them, they are made up of sclerenchyma tissues. Most of them, they are made up of xylem tissues, and those tissues, usually they have a deposit on their walls known as lignin. That is what makes them hard, firm, and rigid. So for this stem, it is very hard. So if I was to put these two plants into groups, do you think I can put them into the same group? No. I'll put them into different groups because these ones, their stems are succulent, but these ones, their stems are hard. Remember, we are learning about classification, putting living organisms into groups based on their structure. Those that have similar structures, we put them into the same group. Those that have different structures, we separate them. So for these two, if you check on their stem, I've said we can have those that are succulent, others are hard. Now, look at the other plant. I also have another plant here. I want you to check on this plant and tell me something about their stem. Tell me something about their stem. Remember, we are saying we are discussing on classification, putting living organisms into groups based on their similarities in structure, or we separate them. Now look at this plant. If I was to identify the parts of this plant, I should be able to see the stem, okay? This part is the stem. And of course, you can be able to see I have some parts that we refer to as the what? The leaves. So we have the leaves, okay? So this plant has leaves, although their leaves are very small in size. Of course, we are going to discuss why should they have that small size. Their leaves are reduced in size. Then they have a stem. Then you can see the flowers. Can you see the flowers? Okay, these are the flowers. These are the flowers. Which color are they? Can you see the red? Yes, these are the flowers. And then we have the leaves that are reduced, the green ones. Okay, can you see the green ones? Yeah, those green ones are the ones we call the leaves. And then we have the stem. Now, if you were to come across this plant and you want to get hold of it, do you think you can touch it easily? No. Why? This stem has thorns. This stem has thorns. If you are to come in contact with those thorns, of course, you'll be pricked. Your hand will be pricked. So we are saying that we have plants whose stems are what? Thorny. We say we have thorny stems. Okay? So if I was to have thorny stems, plants with thorny stems, do you think I could put them into the same group as this plant? Definitely no. Why? There is a difference in their stems. Remember we said you put living organisms into the same group because of their similarities in structure. Now, what about this plant? Let's come to this plant. Now, for this one, for this leaf, I may put it into the same group as this one, okay? This one, we have said the stems are thorny, so they have thorns on their stem. And I said we'll give a reason why they have thorns on their stem. But this one, if you check keenly, I want you to closely have a look at this. If you look at this plant, it also has thorns. Don't know if you can see the thorns? Yes. Can you see here? These are thorns. These are thorns. Okay? Can you see the thorns? If I look, you move to the next part of the plant. Can you see the thorns? These are thorns. Okay? These are thorns. So it means this stem, yes, it is hard. It is a woody stem. But still, it has what? Thorns. So we have stems that are what? Having thorns. So if I was to put them into groups, what do you think could I say? I could take these two and place them into one group. Why? What is the reason of me placing these two plants into one group? In this case, I've used the what? The stem. This stem has thorns. This one also has thorns. So we say they have thorny stems. So basically, in terms of the stems, that is how we put living organisms into different groups based on the thorns. But remember, when we talk about stems, we also talk about the what? The shape. The shape. So we can talk about the shape of the stem. So we can also talk about the shape of the stem. Now, when you talk about the shape of the stem, we can do what? We can look at the shape of the different stems and we put them into different groups. We are going for a short break. Stay tuned. We'll be back very soon. Hello, student. Before we went for our short break, we were discussing on the observable features that we use in plants so that we are able to put them into groups. So far, we have discussed on the stems, and we said that based on the type of stem, we can put plants into different groups. We said we have different types of stem. We have succulent stems, we have hard stems. We also refer to them as woody stems. We have thorny stems. We have smooth stems and many other characteristics. So far we were saying, before we talk about this, we said that we can also add another feature on the shape of the stem. Now, so far, from the specimens that I have, we can check that their stems, the shape of their stems is not the same. The shape of their stems is not the same. There are those that have a definite shape. There are those that have, so if I check on the stem, I can say that some stems are circular. Circular stems we have like this one. This one has a circular stem. So if I can try to remove the leaves so that we see the circular stem. So we said we only use observable features to put plants or to place plants into groups. So if you talk about the shape of this stem, this shape, okay, this one is circular. So this shape of the stem is different from this shape of the stem. Okay, look at this one. So if I was to look at this shape, this one is not circular. This one is not circular. It's more of rectangular. But basically we are saying we can use the shape of a stem to place plants into different groups. So for the part of the stem, I think that is the much we can say for now. So we can use the stems and we place organisms into taxa. We said taxa is a group of organisms that have similar characteristics. So we want to move to the next part, the next structure of a plant that we can use to put or place plants into groups. Now we can go to the roots, talk about the roots. Now, based on the type of roots, so in this case we have different types of roots, so we can talk about types of roots. There are those plants that have tap roots. So number one, we have those plants that have tap roots. We have those plants that have fibrous roots. We have those plants that have adventitious roots. Okay, so adventitious roots. Okay, we have those plants that have prop roots. So there are different types of roots. So based on the type of roots, we can place plants into different groups. For example, as my student, I don't know if you can be able to identify which type of roots are these. Of course, this is a plant. You can see this is grass. And usually we say grass is an example of a plant that we can put in the class of monocotyledonous. So I want to check on the roots. These roots, they are totally different from the roots that we have in these other plants. Okay? They are totally different. So if you look at these roots, then it means because the roots are different, we can place these plants into different groups. Now, for example, which type of root is this? We call this taproot system. We call it taproot system. This is an example of a taproot system. Remember, we are saying that we can use the type of roots to place plants into different groups. So this is taproot root system. Then we also have this one. This is an example of fibrous root system. It is an example of fibrous root system. Mostly we find this type of root system in plants that we classify into monocotyledonous class, or we say monocots. Those are plants that we mostly you find they have fibrous roots. So basically we can see that plants have different types of roots. So those are just a sample of root system that we have in plants, and we can use those type of root system to place plants into different groups. Remember, we are discussing on observable features in plants that we can use to place plants into different groups. And we said those different groups, we call them taxon or taxa. And we gave the difference between taxon and taxa. So number 3, I want us to use another feature. We'll use another feature that is observable in plants, a feature that we can use to put plants into different groups. So we want to talk about the leaves. Okay? We want to talk about the leaves. Which are these observable features that we are going to use in leaves so that we can place plants into different groups? Now, for the part of leaves, there are so many features. Remember we said a plant consists of different parts. It has the stem, it has the roots, it has the flowers and leaves. Now, if you look at this plant, this is a leaf. So allow me to pluck one, okay? I'm going to use this leaf. So this is an example of a leaf. Allow me to pluck another leaf from here so that you see these leaves, they have different features that we are going to use for classification. Then look at this leaf, okay? I believe those leaves are not the same. Look at another leaf here. So all these are leaves, and you see they are not of the same. They are observable differences. They are observable differences. So I want us to identify those observable features that we can use to place these plants into different groups. Number 1, if I was to start with the one that is clearly observed or can be seen by everyone else, number 1, I can talk about the color. Okay? Color of the leaves. Now, do you think all these leaves, they have same colors? Definitely no. They don't have the same colors. So if I was to use the color to place these leaves into groups, definitely these leaves, I'll place them into different groups. For example, the color of these leaves is green. Okay? Can we see that? That is green. And anytime you talk about a leaf being green, it means that it has chlorophyll. It is the pigment chlorophyll that makes a leaf to be green. So if I was to say I want to put these leaves into a class or into a group, then I will say this one should be in a different group. This one should be in a different taxa. Why? Because the leaves are green. Then, if I come to this plant, what is the color of the leaves? Student, what is the color of the leaves? The leaves are purple. The leaves are purple. So it means this purple and this green, if I was to put these plants into taxon, then they should not be in the same taxon because their colors are what? Different. So remember we are discussing on observable features, something that we can see. So those are true. So we also left with this one. I don't know which color is this, student. Can you see that? So if you are to look at the color of these leaves and the color of these leaves, they are totally different. Meaning, if I was to make groups of plants, then I could say these are two different groups of plants. Okay? Yes. Then I'm left with another one here. Look at these leaves. Can you say this leaf is green? Which other color can you observe on this leaf? In this leaf, number one, I can see green color, meaning it has some chlorophyll. At the same time, I can see on the edges, there is another color. Probably, if I'm not colorblind, I can say this color is yellow. So, this is a green leaf with patches of yellow color. A green leaf with patches of yellow color. So in this case, if I was to talk about the color of leaves, from the leaves I have, I could say I have the ones that are green. I have the leaves that were purple. Okay? I have a leaf that has more than one color. There is green, there is some patches of yellow. Now, that type of a leaf, we say that is a variegated leaf. We say variegated. Okay, so this one should be variegated leaf. A leaf that has some patches of green and some patches of a different color. So you can have the one that has patches of green and yellow. Others, they have green and white. Others, so those different patches makes this leaf to be referred to as what? A variegated leaf. So based on the color, I think I can put these leaves or these plants into different groups. Now that is the first part on the leaves. Number two, on the leaves, I think I can get another observable difference. I can talk about the veins. I can talk about the veins. Okay? I can talk about the veins. And in this case, I refer to those leaves that their veins, they are network. And we have some leaves that their veins are parallel. Okay? And I want us to identify some that whose veins, the veins are, for example, let me use this one. I think it can be visible. Okay? For example, this one has what? Which type of veins are here? We talk about network veins. Network veins. So this leaf, I cannot place it in the same group as this one. Why? This one we say it has parallel veins. Parallel veins. This one has network veins. So in that case, I can use the type of veins, like which veins are present in that leaf, and then I put this specimen into two different groups. Okay? That is the type of veins. Lastly, but not least, we can also use another feature in the leaves. We can talk about the margin. The margin, the leaf margin. Now, when we talk about the leaf margin, we have those whose margin is smooth. Okay? We have leaves whose margin is smooth. We have leaves whose margin is, we say, serrated. Okay? And I want to show you what we mean by the leaf margin. So I wanted to check on the margin of this leaf. So if you look at this leaf on the sides, okay, it looks like this. Okay, so if this is the leaf, so I can see the leaf looks like this. Okay, something like that. So we say the margin is this end. So this margin is what we say the leaf margin is serrated. So that is an example of this leaf. The leaf margin is what? It is serrated. But if I look at this other leaf, this one, okay? Let's see on this other leaf, the margin is what? We say the margin is smooth. So if I was to demonstrate that, I'll say the leaf margin is smooth. So if I was given these two leaves and I want to put them, I want to group them, then I'll say they belong to different groups. Why? If I look at the margin, they are different. This one, the margin is smooth. This one, the margin is serrated. So that is an example of the feature that we can use to put living organisms into groups. Now, when we talk about the leaves, there are many other features that we can look into for us to put the plants into different groups. Now, when we talk about the last part, we said on the plant, we also have the flowers. So the fourth part is the flower. Now, for the flowers, usually we can put flowers into, we have those flowers that belong to one group of plants that we call the monocots, and we have those flowers that we put into dicots. Now, for the flowers, what we use to put the flowers into groups, mostly we count the number of floral parts. So we use the floral parts. So for the plants, we use the floral parts. So when we talk about flowers, we use the floral parts. So floral. So the floral parts, of course, in this case, we have the petals, we have the sepals, we have the stigma, we have the anthers. So we use the number of floral parts, the number of floral parts. I'm saying we use the number of floral parts. So we use the number of floral parts. So we have those plants that their floral parts are in threes, okay? Or we say multiple of 3. Their floral parts are in 3 or multiples of 3. That is the first one. Then we have the other ones. So mostly for those plants that their floral parts are in 3s, we usually group them into the class we call monocotyledonous. Okay? I think we learn more about that in our next episode. But for this one, we talk about the floral parts are in 3s or multiples of 3s. Then for the other group of plants, we have those that their floral parts are in 4s, okay, or 5s, or we say multiples of 4s or 5, okay? So we have those that have their floral parts are in multiples of either 4 or multiples of 5. Probably I can demonstrate that so that we are able to see. Now, if you look at this flower, let me just demonstrate that. If you look at this flower, so these are the part of the flower. We have the flowers that are, I believe that is pink in color. So if I was to count, for example, the number of what? Petals. The number of petals. So I want to start counting from here. So I can count and say this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So in that case, the floral parts of this flower is 6. So that means that is multiples of 3. So that one makes it to be a flower that is in which class? A class monocotyledonous. Now, if you talk about this other flower, let me pick another example of a flower. Remember, I just want to show you how we count the floral parts. This one, let's see. This one, we have 1. Okay, let me try to pluck. So we have 1. That is 1 petal. That is 2 petals. That is 3 petals. And those are, that is 4 petals. So it means This is a flower from a dicotyledonous plant. It's a flower from a dicotyledonous plant. Why? The petals are 4. So if the petals are 4, then it means you may not place this plant the same group to the one that we've counted that the petals are what? They are in 3s. Now, if you go further, you can even check. This is the what? So we have the stigma, we have the petals, we have the anthers. So basically we are saying you just count. If it is the stigma, you count. How many are they? Are they 3s or multiples of 3s? Or are they 4 or multiples of 4? Or are they 5 or multiples of 5? So basically we are saying we can also use the floral parts to place plants into different groups. So far, we were learning on the observable features in plants that we can use to place plants into groups. And we said those groups, we refer to them as what? Taxa. Taxa, a group of organisms with similar characteristics. So basically, this is what we've learned for today's lesson. We've learned about observable features that we can use to place organisms into groups. Maybe we should ask ourselves, why should we classify plants? Why should we classify plants? Why should we classify living organisms? I want to welcome you into the next episode where we learn more on classification as we explore more in biology. Thank you. I've been your teacher, Lydia Siago. See you in the next lesson.